Now, there's still no word on a cure for the virus.
Report suspicious activity and call 911.
I can give you every assurance, Mr. Rudy, because it's full and it's very good. Decalibration to all bringing full coverage on
If it was anybody, it's the boss that passed us like 30 seconds ago. From the UFO.
Hey, all you multi-dimensional travelers and ghost clowns. Welcome back to another episode of your favorite podcast, That Would Be Rad. A podcast that majors in 80s and 90s nostalgia, comic culture, all things paranormal, and minors in retro video games, tabletop RPGs, pre-internet mysteries, and raising our kids to be half as cool as we were back in the 80s. We're your hosts, Woody Brown.
And Tyler Benz. How's it going, dude?
Hey, brother man. It's going pretty good, dude.
Cool.
Just like we were kind of talking about earlier today on the phone, spring is here. The flowers are blooming, and I'm getting kind of punched in the throat by my my allergies.
Yikes.
No fun, man.
No fun. Yeah, I think I was telling you earlier that it's weird. It's like one year they'll just be awful, and it's like every single day it's hitting me. But then other years, it's like it just doesn't even faze me at all. I will say, though, speaking of allergies, for everybody out there, we had Woody and his wife, Ann, and myself and my wife, Courtney. We had a game night where we played Cranium, and, man, being around that cat of yours, boy, now that kills my allergies.
Yeah, man, game night was awesome, dude. Like, it was cool because we played it a couple different ways. First, it was guys versus girls, and then it was we kind of like switched up couples. So me and your wife were a team, and you and my wife were a team, and then we switched it again, and my wife and I were a team, and you and your wife were a team.
Which I've got to say, your wife and myself are a real triple threat. We're awesome.
Yeah, but like,
Hold on.
take that team,
Yeah.
versus like me and you as a team.
Yeah, that's true.
Come on, man.
That's true. That's true.
I mean, let's just like whenever I drew the bike with the training wheels, bam, you would have gotten that.
Oh yeah, that is true. It is weird. I think there is something about, and this kind of ties in with this too. So, like lately, so my wife and I have never watched Survivor. I know our old bass player Boo Boo and his family. You know, they would
Was
like,
that their show?
yeah, they would like set the timer on the TV, and like it was like a big deal. But we've never watched it. I always thought it was just kind of cheesy and, you know, reality TV, whatever. But we recently started watching it, and that ties in with this. Is like there's something really interesting to me about, and obviously there's some anomalies, and like it's not, you know, dead set. But I think it's interesting to see the difference in men versus women as far as like problem solving, and like on Survivor, it's like puzzles and these sort of type of things. But it was really clear the other night at game night with like they would get like the girls would get certain things right that would blow our minds. We would be like, how did they just do that? But then they would totally miss stuff that you and I would be looking at each other like, how did you miss that? It's really interesting just the way like the male to female mind is sort of
Well,
made
I
up.
love how that game's designed too, because you know you can be good at a couple of different things, but man, some of the stuff that'll pop up, you're like, what in the world? And we had some like crazy moments that I just like pulled things out of thin air, man.
Oh, dude. Well, I gotta say, it's funny because so Ann, Woody's wife, and myself are like, we're both great at spelling. We're both a real sort of encyclopedic knowledge on like a lot of random stuff and like music and songs, and like so we should have won, and during this game that Woody was with my wife Courtney, but like it was insane, like the
Miracles,
stuff
man.
it was
Miracles.
miraculous. Like I don't know how you guys got any of this stuff, but you guys just totally slaughtered us.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Pretty amazing.
And then, you know, of course, we're just talking trash the whole time. Like, that's what happens when you have when you've got victory in your blood. I mean, just stupid stuff.
That's such a great game.
Yeah, it is a fun game. It's cool because it kind of like incorporates so many games into one. Like Ann and I were kind of talking. It's like, well, should we get like, a different game for another night? And we're like, no. Because if it's just like Pictionary, that kind of gets old a little bit.
Well, don't think we didn't try to
Oh, man. I mean, the whole day or two leading
days.
up to game night, I would just essentially copy and paste. I took a picture of like a Dungeons and Dragons like module box or whatever, and I would just like post it in the text thread like nonstop. Hey guys, just in case you didn't get it, I mean, here's a game that I think we can kind of probably play. Fling, 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 and just like constantly text them. And both of our wives were pretty adamant about not
Yeah.
not doing it.
I
But
was thinking that it could work. I think that if
I knew that it wouldn't.
well, I mean, I partially did too, but I think that if Anne wasn't so like hard no on it, I think you could probably convince Courtney to do it.
Yeah, maybe so. Speaking of Dungeons and Dragons, man, we also met with one of our buddies who is going to be joining our Dungeons and Dragons group as we
Yeah.
go into this new campaign. And man, that was awesome because like we're not going to get super into it here, but he is going to be a sorcerer, and it's funny. Once you kind of like mentally choose what you want to be and what you want to play in the game, like what you want your player to be, you really just kind of focus on that and research the heck out of it, and you don't really pay attention to anything else.
Yeah.
And so when we were helping him create his character, I had zero knowledge, like at all, about the sorcerer class, and just like to learn all that new stuff
Oh, it was awesome.
is super exciting. And it's gonna be so awesome to have him on board, man.
Yeah, the cool thing about, and again, we probably just lost half the listens just the second we started talking about D&D. But the interesting thing is there's, like what he was saying, there's so much that's just involved with it that once you kind of pick your class, if you're like, okay, I want to be an elf, wizard, then, I mean, you could spend all your time just looking into that stuff, and you still would never learn it all. But like, what's cool about D&D, and like this is kind of what Woody was talking about, is like in the old days, I think it was easier just to say, okay, well, I'm going to be a wizard, and that just means this sort of Gandalf archetype. You cast spells, you have a big hat, you have a staff and a beard, and like the end. Well, some of the things that we learned when we were doing this is like, there's a difference. So you have your standard wizard, which is somebody who pores over old like tomes of knowledge and old books and scrolls found in like dungeons and yada yada yada, and they spend they're very sort of academic with it, like they're always studying and trying to learn all these new things. And then you have your sorcerer who, whether it's caused by like being part of a certain bloodline or something that like sort of a not really a curse, but like a blessing was cast on your family lineage or yada, 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 you're born with this sort of innate magical ability. And then you have a warlock who is basically, you don't have to study anything. You basically make a pact with whatever deity. So it's, you make a deal with the devil. And then suddenly you just have endless magical, potential. But it's really, really cool, just the difference in all that stuff. But yeah, we're super excited about our buddy John Packer, joining the fold. I think he's going to love it. He's a good friend of mine. Him and I have a comic book that we both wrote, and he's like sort of doing the heavy lifting on the writing, and then I'm doing the artwork and stuff. But I think we're actually going to pitch it to Image here soon. So that's pretty exciting. But yeah, Johnny's awesome, and I definitely want to get him on the show. He has an amazing knowledge of like, sort of toys, and he's like a big collector of like all the Mondo stuff and all that. But then mainly he has like such a crazy knowledge of Batman the Animated Series, and I would love to do an episode on that. And he's a badass bass player.
Oh, yeah,
He's
man.
Played with us for a while.
Man, I wanted to kind of talk about like some of the stuff we've been watching. Like we kind of went over it, like I said on the phone. Like I've been getting back into the Alien movie franchises,
yeah.
and like all that stuff. Just it really still holds up, man. And it's just fascinating to me that like, I don't know, I no matter what, even the ones that are kind of like lame, there's some lame decisions and all that. And I know the franchise as a whole kind of feels watered down, but I still enjoy them, man. They're just kind of like the Terminator movies. If a Terminator movie comes out, I'm going to see it. If an Alien movie comes out, I'm going to see it. If a Godzilla movie comes out, Like it's coming out this week, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to see it. You
Yeah.
know, they're just entertaining. I'm not expecting a whole lot of Oscar-worthy performances, although I think Sigourney Weaver in the Alien movies is just awesome.
Yeah, she's pretty awesome.
I mean, what a character, man. Ripley.
Yeah, and we were talking earlier about James Cameron and his, love for those big sort of mech
Yeah,
suits.
like mech warrior suits and stuff.
Yeah, that yellow. What's cool about it on Aliens too, whenever she busts out that suit, is it's like, I like that it wasn't made for like battle. It was made as like sort of a utility
Yeah.
thing, and that just kind of makes it even cooler. I
Yeah,
love that
he
stuff.
kind of used that same sort of like, I guess, design technology, whatever you want to call it, in like Avatar and stuff. You know, he just loves like putting humans in big machines and
Oh, yeah.
and that kind of stuff. He likes big machines. I mean, he likes monster trucks in the Terminator movies. Like every Terminator movie he makes, not
Dude.
monster trucks. There's like
semi truck.
18-wheelers
Yeah.
and like even that newer one that he did. Oh gosh, what's it called? Is it Genesis? The newest one, and it felt like a James Cameron Terminator movie.
Was that the newest one?
I think so. I don't know if it's called Genesis or not, but it's like the new, whatever the newest one
The
is.
new one, the newest one was. I thought it was actually really good.
Yeah.
I think
It's 'cause
Genesis I didn't love.
Yeah, I don't remember what it was called, but it's like the newer one, and James Cameron is the one that did it, and it felt like what I kind of wanted like T3 to be. Although I did enjoy Claire Danes.
Yeah, I agree. Real quick before we move on, speaking of like mech suits, the suits that were used in like Avatar. Did you ever play with those toys as a kid? They were called Exo Squad.
And I feel like we've talked about them before, and I definitely remember them, but I don't think I had one.
It's like straight up like those exact suits. I'm pretty sure the guys at Wizards have some under the glass, but
Oh, man.
yeah, they were really cool toys, and basically the same thing. You know, it's like a little guy in this huge sort of like mech exo suit kind of thing. It's really cool.
Yeah.
Anything else you've been into
I mean,
lately?
and I think we've kind of talked about it on the show before, TV show wise, The Dragon Prince.
I actually just started watching it too.
So
Pretty
good.
cool, man. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like a cool, there's a lot of just like, there's humor in there. There's like actual sort of like dramatic stuff that happens, you know. It's just really, really, it's an animated series. You can watch it on Netflix. I think there's 2 or 3 seasons. I'm only like kind of maybe just starting in the 2nd season, but it's really, really cool.
Yeah, I started. The thing that sucks is like just with my job, like drawing and stuff. I had to take some design work recently, but when I'm drawing, I kind of just have it on in the background. So I'm sure I'm missing a lot. But man, one thing about that show that is just amazing is like just some of the like visualization of the way they use like magic and stuff. I mean, it's really, really cool. Like the way they'll sort of like write these sigils like in the air, and then that sort of focuses like the magic. It's really cool.
Yeah, man.
Love that
It's
stuff.
really awesome.
I have actually been, so I bought this book years ago just because it has a cool cover and it has like this old sort of wizard on it, which is not representative at all of what the actual book's about, but it's called Old Gods Waken, and it's written by this guy called Manly Wade Wellman, which is an amazing name. He's kind of an obscure author, born in like 1909, I think, from West Africa. Came over here, became a lawyer, and then became obsessed with like Appalachia and wanting to learn as much as he could about the folklore. So I think originally he started out writing sort of, you know, your typical science fiction fare and sending it into like Fate magazine and sort of these magazine publications that were like, you know, your kind of typical 50s sci-fi sort of concepts, you know. But then he stumbled across, he kind of created several things. So he has one that's like, it's a guy called like John, I can't remember his last name, but he's basically a New York socialite in like the 30s and 40s. Like that's the character who like kind of solves crimes and stuff. And it sounds really cool, but my favorite is, and this is what the Old Gods Waken book is about. It's about this character called Silver John, or he's kind of known as like John the Balladeer. and he's like just this dude who travels around Appalachia and like has a guitar with silver strings on it. And he fights all this sort of like occult and like, I mean, literally. And I found an article where Mike Mignola, who wrote, he writes Hellboy and sort of the Mignola verse, like he's pretty much accredited Manly Wade Wellman as like, yeah, I'm basically, Hellboy is literally the same thing as Silver John. Because it's kind of these sort of, and like every little book or short story is like, you're just kind of like popping Silver John like in this scenario of like, he kind of just roams around Appalachia, these mountains, and like trying to learn like all these old songs, and he'll kind of get tangled up in like a story of like, okay, well, this family, they let him stay at their house, and if he agrees to like play music for them, and then he comes to find out that there's like this whole like cult or these like druids or these like monsters and stuff. But it's just amazing. I mean, a lot of it is a lot of the stuff that like we talk about, but I mean, it's set in the 50s. It was written in the 50s, but it's an interesting take to see this guy like straight up country Appalachian dude, kind of battling these more sort of high concept, sort of occult adversaries. It's amazing. I can't wait for you to read it.
So it's like backwoods Southern Mandalorian.
Yes,
Who
pretty much.
plays music.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
Yeah, like there's like, for example, there's one. I think it was one of his first short stories called Vandy Vandy, and it's based off this, I think, an old Appalachian song called Vandy Vandy. That it's like this sort of this guy, and he kind of keeps. He's almost like a vampire. Almost, he's like immortal, but he keeps kind of like coming back for this family, this like lineage of every 30 or so years they'll have like another daughter, and then their family will have another daughter, and they name her Vandy, and it's like his job to kind of come and like take away and like corrupt that daughter. It's really bizarre, but like it's like he'll do this stuff where he'll he flips a coin over to the main bad guy. I can't remember his name, but he grabs the coin and like freaks out because of silver, and it's just all this really cool stuff. Then he casts this sort of magic thing, and there's like a giant George Washington is sort of like transported there, and he like it's really bizarre, and it's really like kind of high concept stuff, but it's amazing, dude. I cannot wait for you to read it.
And it's just like a collection of like little stories within that book.
Yeah. Anything
Each chapter, kind of, or
well, kind of. I mean, I think he's done a ton of them, but the one I'm reading is The Old Gods Awaken. It's just a story within itself. I think it's like 200 pages, but there's another book called John the Balladeer, and it's pretty big, and I think it has all of them. But the thing is like they're out of print, so they're almost impossible to find, and they're pretty expensive. Like my book is like $100, and I got it for like $3 at a bookstore. But
yeah, that's the thing, man. You got to find those like out of print books at like used bookstores. That's the key, man.
Yeah, it's super cool though, and there's actually a quote that Gary Gygax, when creating Dungeons and Dragons in the old days, Silver John was actually a direct sort of inspiration for his, bard, like the bard, the class of being a bard. So that's pretty cool.
That is pretty cool, man.
Mm-hmm.
I've been reading I read like 7 of the Drizzt books, but after those, I bought the Dragonlance Chronicles, which was written by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman back in the 80s. And it's just, man, it's interesting because like Drizzt takes place in what is called like the Forgotten Realms sort of world. And that's sort of what like every edition of D&D right now, like the 5th edition or whatever, that's the world that it takes place in. Like all these adventure modules and stuff that they create. Yeah. All these things happen.
That's like D&D proper. Like
happen in the Forgotten Realms. But Dragonlance was just one of the worlds kind of created relatively around the same time, but it's just a whole different sort of world. Same kind of like creatures and stuff, but just different. Think of it as like different continents,
Right. Well, also it's very like, I remember as a kid, I had a couple issues of Dragonlance. DC Comics put out several miniseries or whatever, Dragonlance, and like the difference between that and at least then and sort of Dungeons and Dragons proper was like it was more like knights and maidens and dragons and a little more like I don't want to say like surface level fantasy, but
Yeah, because I mean, like even within, I think maybe that's the case for like the comics,
yeah,
but like
yeah,
in these books, I mean, right out of the gate, these like characters have encountered like I would say more creatures truly
Really?
than what happens in the Drizzt stuff. I mean,
Wow.
in Drizzt, especially the original trilogy, they fight some hobgoblins and some giants and I think a dragon
Yeah.
and then a wizard. But
Well, I
in
do
these,
know-
it's like you've got griffins, you've got dragons, you've got draconian like warriors and lizard men and like I mean just tons and tons of stuff, man. A
That's
unicorn.
Maybe it's just like the visuals that I'm
Yeah, I mean I think it's more like traditional sort of like quote unquote fantasy.
right.
Whereas
yeah.
like the Drizzt books are more like
A little more.
I don't
like,
know. I just love them both. They're so different.
Mm-hmm.
But I love them both. They're so good, man. The first book, like, I finished volume 1 of the Dragonlance Chronicles over the weekend, and
Man, you are plowing through those things.
no, man, that one took me a lot longer than the Drizzt books, man, because it's like, I don't know, 500 pages or something.
Yeah, but dude, when you first discovered, like we first got into D&D several months ago, and then you and I were talking about the books, and I was like, man, these like the books with like Drizzt in it, like Streams of Silver, and what's the other one?
Well, Streams of Silver is the second one,
right?
The Crystal Shard,
Crystal
Streams of
Shard.
Silver, and the Halfling's Gem.
Yeah, I was kind of like pumping those up, and because I read them like way forever ago in middle school, and you're like, yeah, cool, I'm gonna get into these. And how many have you read now?
7.
Jeez.
And then the Icewind, not Icewind Dale, the Dragonlance book, I've only read one of those. But
Wow.
yeah, man, they're really, really good. And it makes for a good sort of buffer in between playing D&D and stuff because
Yeah.
you feel like you're in that world. And it's just really, really well written,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, cool. I've also been into Reno 911, which,
Yes.
like I said before, it's like I'm an artist, so and/or designer sometimes, I guess. But I'm always kind of like doing stuff, so I'm always on the hunt for like shows that I can just kind of have in the background, and I guess technically it would be sort of an anthology show, like. You could pretty much just
man, you don't
any
you can just
episode
start.
Yeah, but
I've been
it's fun.
watching in the background. And it's so funny, man. I love all those old shows that we used to be into and kind of getting back into them. Like, man, we used to watch Arrested Development
Oh man,
like every day in the tour van, right? And so I recently got back into that show, man. And God, it is just
it's so good.
so funny because like same for me, like my day to day in like sales or even any of the sort of data entry stuff that I have to do sometimes, and like putting together proposals and stuff. You can't watch a movie
No.
or have a movie playing really in the background. So it's got to be like something that's just kind of like you hear every now and then, and it's kind of funny, And Arrested Development is just, man, it's just so hilarious.
Yeah.
Like every single character is hilarious. Like the writing is hilarious, and I mean, gosh, man, old Jessica Walter, the lady that played Lucille Bluth, just recently passed away. So
horrible.
that sucks, man.
Yeah.
But man, she's hilarious too. It's just so good, man.
Yeah, that's such a funny show. I think I think my wife Courtney hated it.
Yeah.
but I feel like she would like it if she could just like.
Well, dude, when it was on TV on like Fox or whatever,
Yeah.
I remember seeing like part of an episode, and I was like, dude, this is garbage.
Oh, me too.
Because I didn't
Yeah.
see like the pilot or whatever. I just didn't, for whatever reason at the time, just wasn't into it.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely a show where you kind of have to get like the swing of like what they're doing and like what they're aiming for, because it's funny because it's like some stuff is so outlandish and just kind of like just way over the top that you would think wouldn't be funny, but then it's kind of paired with this like super subtle, almost like subconscious humor too, where it's like just like with like like Jason Bateman will just like give a glance to like the camera, and like it's that sort of tongue-in-cheek stuff, but man, it is so brilliant. Like the writing is just
It's just amazing.
It's so good.
Illusions, Dad. They're illusions. And then like how they always mess up Job's name. Like in the very first episode, dude, there's this like thing where like he tries to put his dad in this like, I think he called it like the ancient Aztec tomb.
Oh,
and it's like
right.
a disappearing trick or whatever. And the news reporter's like, and although a pretty good trick for a human, the dogs found him right away. And they show like how it's done, and Job's like, oh man, the Magician's Alliance is gonna probably frown on that. And then as he's saying that, the reporter's saying something along the lines of like, and Bluth's son Gob. So she like completely mispronounces his name because it's spelled differently, and it's just, man, little stuff like that that's just sprinkled throughout the show that is just so hilarious.
Yeah, it's an amazing show. Well, cool. Well, you know what? Let's go to a break, and when we get back, since it is spring break, and since we have had a good bit of like new listeners coming on board, you know, we thought it would be cool to bring back some of our time capsules from the past.
Yeah, so Tyler and I were talking, and you know, the downside of recording these really compelling stories is like every single time after we've completed the episode and we publish the episode and it's all done and we're super proud of it, generally we either find out something new or want to talk more about, you know, that, because as we do other episodes, we end up kind of having a lot of things that like connect them all together. And so we wanted to, you know, take the time to pick out a couple of our favorite time capsules that we've done and, you know, talk about them, give you the chance to kind of hear them again, and then kind of us sort of discuss some stuff.
Yeah.
Kind of behind the scenes type stuff.
Yeah.
And anything that we kind of figured out later.
Yeah, for sure.
After these messages, we'll be right back.
America's future can be determined by our dreams and our visions.
It was very intense, bright light.
For over 200 years, there have been reports of giant man-like creatures.
From another dimension, another world, I don't know.
The most intriguing mystery on the North American continent.
You're listening to That Would Be Rad.
We've all been weary after a long day's travel. Not quite feeling like ourselves when we deplane at our destination. Maybe you've landed in a place or a country you've never been, or perhaps even one that you've been to many times. No matter what, the feeling of being tired and just wanting to get to your destination as soon as you can, I think is universal for all travelers. Sometimes airport security can seem overbearing or customs officials even intimidating, but they serve an important purpose in all of our safety. But what if when you arrived and presented your identification or passport, you were met with a blank expression of mystery and intrigue? What if the airport customs official had never heard of where you just came from? A place that you'd been traveling from successfully without any issues all of your life. What if you found out you just flew from a place that they're telling you doesn't exist? The place you call home. On a scorching hot summer's day in July 1954, a passenger airline touched down at Haneda Airport in Tokyo, Japan. It was late afternoon, the sun still high in the sky and beaming down as the passengers disembarked, the heat waves shimmering across the tarmac. They were mostly Japanese, perhaps returning from a vacation or visiting other parts of the world, but there were several European travelers as well. Nothing in particular that would have stood out as strange to any of the fellow airport travelers or even the Japanese customs officials. To them even, it was probably just another normal day at the office. However, one passenger did catch their attention. A slender, well-dressed European man with a slight beard, carrying a nice leather briefcase along with his luggage, stepped up next at the customs counter. The customs official took his normal-looking and appropriately worn passport. The man's primary language was French, although he spoke Japanese very well as several other languages. When asked, he told the officials in Japanese that he was there on business. They, of course, had zero reason to disbelieve him. He didn't appear to be a tourist. As the customs official looked down at his passport, that's when things took a bizarre turn. The passport had several travel stamps from several different nations, including Japan. There was nothing about the passport that looked fake or counterfeit. What stood out and struck the official as odd, however, was his country of origin. Emblazoned on his passport in bold lettering was the name Taurid. The official, nor his nearby officials whom he called over, recognized this name. They didn't doubt, however, the authenticity or validity of the passport. They did pull him aside for clarification and to allow the building customs line to keep moving. They then asked the man to follow them into a small side office used for interviews not unlike this one, so they could begin further questioning and clarification. The man, who was polite, cooperated willingly. They asked him for other forms of identification, which he happily obliged and calmly handed over, showing that he was, in fact, a citizen of a country named Taurid. He also presented currency and banknotes issued by his homeland, which again didn't look counterfeit at all. Confused but completely intrigued and curious, the Japanese customs officials placed a map of the world on the table. They slid it over to the man and asked him to point out where his country was located. He smugly agreed, smiling, no doubt beginning to get slightly frustrated at the charade the officials were putting him through. Pulling the map closer to himself so he could quickly show them, his smug expression changed immediately to one of confusion and then shock. He pointed to an area right on the border between France and Spain, where the modern-day Principality of Andorra is currently, saying that this is where his homeland should have been.
I don't understand.
In a confused, somewhat frantic voice, he declared that the kingdom of Taurid was over 1,000 years old and that there was no reason it wouldn't be on any standard world map. He also claimed this was his third trip to Japan that year. He'd made similar trips over the past 5 years and had never encountered any problems at customs before. He again pointed to the country stamps on his passport as evidence of these trips. Beginning to get frustrated, he asked the officials to call the company he was visiting, or to call the hotel where he had a reservation, or even to call his company who could verify who he was. The officials, also becoming equally agitated, called the company he claimed he was visiting, who said that they had never heard of him. Looking up the company he worked for, they discovered didn't exist. And calling the hotel where he had made a reservation, they couldn't find under his name. At this point, his confusion and perhaps even amusement had quickly turned to anger. He began accusing the staff of pulling an elaborate joke at his expense. He then demanded to see government officials immediately so they could clear the matter up and he could be on his way. Since they couldn't detain him indefinitely in this small office, they agreed to let him stay at the airport hotel on one of the top floors while he waited for the government officials and authorities to arrive. 2 guards were placed outside the door of the room under strict orders to not let the man leave under any circumstances. He was served a meal and reportedly took a nap. But when the government officials arrived later that evening, they knocked on his door and found there was no response. Asking the guards to open the room, upon entering, the man from Taured and all his belongings had vanished without a trace. The guards, of course, were strongly questioned, and they maintained that no one had come in or out the room except room service for the meal. They had never left their post, and the only other exit was from a sealed, ledgeless window that was 6 floors above the road below. The fall alone would have killed anyone that attempted that jump, not to mention broken the window glass and left shards of evidence behind. Although obviously baffled by this entire encounter, no one, including the authorities, ever saw this man again. Who was this man from Taured? How did he possibly vanish from a duly guarded room on the 6th floor of a hotel? One theory is that he was an unwitting interdimensional traveler who came from a reality not too unlike our own, with, of course, at least one obvious difference: his homeland of Taured. When he awoke from his nap, did he wake up back in his dimension of origin, in another hotel room, confused that perhaps it was all just a dream? Did he then spend the rest of his life wondering about that vivid dream, never quite sure if it had ever actually happened? Maybe he ended up reporting his experience in his universe. Perhaps the legend even being told right now on a podcast, much like this one.
First thing I have to say, which we talked about this back when we recorded that, is that hello at the end sounds exactly like me.
I know, man. Whenever I put it in there, even later, and that's something that I kind of want to talk about before we get into like any of the crazy stuff about the man from Taured that we kind of have maybe new theories or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was, where I was kind of really sort of stretching my legs in terms of sound design.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, there's like stuff that I think even the listener hearing it again, potentially, I think it's impossible for them to pick up. Like that's actual like airport ambience from a Japanese airport.
Yeah.
That's buried in there. There is
Wasted time to the casual listener.
Yeah. I mean, but I love that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
man. I love like when we have a story, like building the sound design, finding all of the stuff that's going to just really kind of make the story even more entertaining and stuff.
Yeah.
And it's also where I kind of dabbled with a little bit of voice acting. So if you notice, like the man from Taured, I gave him a little bit of an accent, and I don't really know from where or whatever.
Yeah.
But like listening back to it, it kind of made me laugh a little bit because I was like, that's impossible. I don't even know how I did it. It's
Well, hey,
just
I mean, nobody
hilarious.
else knows either, so
Yeah, I mean, it sounded like it was the man from Taured, right?
It's exactly accurate.
Exactly.
Yeah, I got to say, I mean, and this is something that we never really, I don't think we've talked about at all, but you do such an amazing job of like the sort of creating this sort of like bed, this soundscape for all of our time capsules that it's really amazing. And I think it's one of the things that sort of sets us apart as a podcast.
Well, I appreciate
But
it, bro.
You're fantastic.
Thanks, man. It's super fun, man.
All right, folks. Well, we'll see.
That's it anyway. No, like it is so much fun, like I said, to like as we are discussing a story or whatever, I'm just like making pages and pages of things that I want to hear, when they're happening. So like in other episodes, like if you go back and you listen to the Halloween like the Halloween special, where we tell our own kind of spooky stories and have guests come on and tell theirs.
Yep.
Like I always want to place the listener right where we're talking about.
Right.
You know, and so like whenever that's how I approach it, I want you to almost just feel like you're there, you know. And so sometimes I think it kind of stinks in a way that people may listen to it in a car, because even then you might be able to hear some of the almost like, well, truly like three-dimensional sound design that I do.
Yeah.
But, you know, if you get a chance to put on some headphones and listen to those time capsules, it's a whole nother world. I mean, you'll hear things that you might not have the first time around. Now, the thing that's interesting about The Man from Taured, that was like our second sort of story that we told on the podcast. But after that, I feel like almost every story in some way since then kind of, you know, has some connective tissue, as you've said before, like to it. You know, I mean, like everything from the one that we're going to hear next and
John Teeter.
Yeah, John Teeter, even some a little bit Mandela effect. You know, because I mean, he literally came from a place that had like a different name that didn't exist in our world. You know, so there's like is he a time traveler? Is he multidimensional? Is he part of the Mandela effect?
Well, I definitely think he's multidimensional. I think the thing for me is that's so interesting about this is like, and this isn't the only one. I mean, there's tons and tons of stories and accounts, you know, some unverified, but others that are like really true, where these people, and again, this is kind of the interesting part, is like these people just kind of wake up and or like something just clicks and all of a sudden they're in these other, you know, realities or dimensions or whatever, which is just fascinating. I mean, there's one where I think this woman was in like the 80s, maybe even early 90s, where, and you can find it online, but she wakes up and notices that her husband isn't in the bed with her. You know, wakes up on a morning, her alarm goes off, I think, wakes up to go to work and realizes that her husband isn't there. She's calling his name, looking around. She starts to notice that like things are different around the house. Like she's not seeing his clothes in the hamper in the bathroom. She's not, like there's certain pictures that are like missing. Then she doesn't really think anything about it. She realizes that his name isn't in her phone. Ends up going to work, and once she gets there, she realizes that she's the head. She's like a supervisor over the position that she was in this other life. So like, there's all these really bizarre things, but she kind of goes nuts. Like it drives her kind of crazy. And I want to say she had to be, you know, admitted or whatever.
Yeah, I think we talked about this specific one
on the episode.
Yeah, on the episode.
Oh, okay, cool. Well,
yeah,
we'll just cut it out, I guess.
No. Or we just talked about it in general. That's the thing. You know, that's another thing, like, is a consequence of kind of like making these sort of quote unquote like final and publishing them as an episode, is like you kind of forget like other stories that are similar that you talked about on the show. But dude, the funny full circle kind of thing here is, do you remember that episode of The Office? It was like a cold open where Jim and Pam played a prank on Dwight by inviting like one of Jim's friends, who was played by
the dude
Jimmy Woo, from WandaVision.
Yep.
And basically they just acted they replaced pictures,
that
like
was
family
amazing.
pictures that Dwight like was used to, and acted like Jim and Pam. And he's like, "What are you talking about, Dwight?" I mean, what an awesome prank! But it kind of reminded me of that, like sort of Man from Taured stuff, and you know, I think too there's some commonality with our episode from last week when you talked about the everyday chemistry.
Oh, I'm so glad.
And that guy that you know, brought back potentially some new or different Beatles music that exists in a parallel or other universe, dimension, whatever you want to call it. I mean, it again, it's all this like cohesive,
synchronistic kind of.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's just nuts.
Yeah, one thing that Woody and I have always kind of had this, where you and I both are of the belief that, like, you know, when you're having all these sort of synchronicities, when all these things are kind of lining up, it's almost kind of like the hand of God sort of pushing you in the right direction. That's kind of how I've always looked at it. But especially since we started the podcast, it's like it's just this constant, you know, synchronicity. Like all of our stories somehow tie into another story, and it's pretty amazing. It's pretty.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Well,
kind
and it's even more amazing because I think on the outside looking in, it could just be like, well, all their episodes seem to tie in together really quick. I mean, really well. And it's like, man, it's actually kind of luck because sometimes we're like, oh, man, I really want to talk about this, or, oh, yeah, I remember this, you know. And, you know, it's funny because you completely surprised me with that, you know, topic last week with everyday chemistry. And, you know, we didn't mention it when we recorded the episode, but like shortly after when we were talking about this and after I'd gone back and like listened to the music and that kind of thing, like the thing that like hit me almost immediately was, okay, look, I don't know, like listening to the music and being a huge Beatles fan, it does, and you mentioned this in the episode, it does sort of sound like somebody did a really awesome job of mixing together solo Beatles stuff and less known Beatles songs, and then kind of like mixed them all together. But what it reminded me of was the Beatles album that came out for the Cirque du Soleil.
Love.
Yeah, Love, right? And because we I don't remember if it was on the episode or when you and I were just talking, it's like, it's so good that someone would have had to have had access to the masters.
Yeah.
And listener, when we're talking about the masters, basically what that means is every single individual track, whenever you're laying down music, is like an individual thing. You'd have to have that in order to isolate just that performance to use it in something else, right? So that there's no like bleed over. If you're trying to mix like Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, that song with like, I don't know, Yesterday or something like that, it would just sound like a jumbled mess because you'd have all the instruments playing if you're just, you know, trying to mix the songs together. But if you had the individual tracks, you could do a lot of stuff, even making the vocals as they were sung fit into a melody that didn't quite fit by like being able to change the pitch of the vocals, all kinds of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So we basically came to the agreement that, okay, if this was fake and not like from another dimension, then they would have to have had the masters because it's just so well done that they had to have that access to make it so isolated and make it all fit.
Yeah.
Well, then timing-wise, I started thinking like, okay, I remember that George Martin and his son were the ones that went in and remixed all those songs for that Love album that, you know, they used for, you know, the Cirque du Soleil or whatever. And then I started thinking, you know, they would be the ones because they were the ones that, I mean, George Martin was like the Beatles producer the entire time.
I mean, they called him the fifth Beatle.
Yeah, man, he's brilliant.
Yeah.
Although, fun fact, Eleanor Rigby, the strings part, he actually didn't produce because Paul McCartney got a little big for his britches, but also just kind of impatient and didn't want to wait for, I think the scheduling was kind of weird. And so he just went in and recorded it and conducted the orchestra and everything and mixed it the way that he wanted to. And it always kind of like made George Martin mad. But at the end of the day, man, that's an incredible arrangement.
Yeah. I mean, I do got to say, the Paul version 1 never would have done that.
Yeah, probably not. What an imposter.
Yeah, the imposter Paul.
But anyway, the timing lines up to where our theory, again, if it's not, you know, truly from another dimension, this album, the theory then is somebody, maybe an engineer, somebody that had access after hours or something, could probably have, I don't want to say steal, but, you know, used those master copies to be able to do something like this. Or it's just some audio engineer that's just amazing at what they do. And in either case, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, no, it really is amazing. And honestly, I mean, dude, the whole album is pretty good. I mean, there's one or two songs that clearly kind of sound like a mashup.
Yeah, even the first one.
That's the one I'm talking about mainly.
Yeah.
But then it's weird because like Sick to Death, which is my favorite on the whole album, it's such a bizarre song. And you know, kind of what Woody was talking about is like, you know, you'll go in the comment section on YouTube and you know, everybody will be like, oh, well, no, this, you know, this song was used, this song was used, this song was used. So you go to like listen to the songs, and it's not only like a pitch thing, because it's pretty easy to go in and like transpose, say Woody goes in and sings a part, and then we decide, oh man, like, we'd rather have that in the key of D instead of the key of C. Well, then it'll sound a little weird, but I mean, you can transpose it to the key that you want. But the thing that's weird about this album as a whole, and I looked at, even after I kind of continued to like look up certain parts. Sorry, I hit my mic. These parts are like slightly different. Like some of them sound pretty close. Like, yeah, maybe the pitch was taken, but then there's other things where it sounds like it was sang completely different, and that kind of even leads to the credibility of, I mean,
either that or like maybe, because another thing that the listener might not know is, whenever you go in to sing now, except for me, whenever I was singing vocals, I basically got it, first take. That's
every time.
That was the keeper.
Same on guitar. Yeah.
No, but like you're gonna sing it a couple different times, and each time, even if you try your just absolute best, you're still not going to sing it exactly the same way. The inflections of your voice, the way the tone of your vocals, there's going to be little things off. Now you can get really, really close.
Well,
but even still, it's going to be a little different. And so sometimes,
and the average listener would maybe never know the difference.
Yeah, would maybe never know the difference. But like sometimes they might, like the way you emphasize a certain word or something like that. So it again, like playing sort of like the opposite side of what you're saying, like they would also have to have the copies of all of those takes so that they can use those takes to make it sound different, which is really, really cool if you think about it.
Yeah, no, that's where I was going actually with that, is I think somebody, whoever did this, they had to have the masters, because some of the stuff...
Sounded like you just said they had to have a mattress.
They had to have a mattress. No, they had to have the masters. And not only that, but again, some of these isolated vocals, isolated guitar parts, whatever, they're just different. They're played different. They're sang different. So our theory is that, and again, maybe we're totally wrong, and maybe it was a multidimensional thing, but this is equally fascinating that, well, maybe George Martin, maybe his son, who would have all the masters and who would have this massive archive and library of B-sides and alternate takes. I mean, the Stones and the Beatles would do that. They would have like, I used to work with a guy named Roby in a studio, and when I was recording in LA before Woody and I started our band, and he had worked on Bridges to Babylon and a bunch of Rolling Stone stuff, and he said that they would do this thing where, they would have a song, and then they would say, okay, well, let's record the Nashville version. And it would be like, okay, well, let's take the song, but let's play it, take out all the minors, and let's do like a country tuning and kind of make it sound as country. Okay, well, let's do this other version or this other version. So I feel like whoever did this had access to that kind of stuff, like those alternate take
and
versions.
Since it's the Beatles, that stuff is kept under lock and key. So it had to be somebody in there. And like it didn't necessarily have to be George Martin's son, and his name's kind of escaping me now, but like it could have been like an engineer, because oftentimes too, the producer will come in, they'll work real hard all day long, the engineer's left to like bounce the tracks all night or whatever it is, and that engineer, although trusted, could do something like this for fun, for no profit, and kind of escape sort of legal troubles.
Well, and even and I think we were talking about this before, even if it was George Martin or George Martin's son, it again sort of lends to nobody ever coming out and admitting it, because while it's really cool, you would get a rain of hellfire of legal problems. You know what I mean? Especially if it was him who had the masters, and it's like, that'd be a big deal.
Yeah, for sure, man.
It's still cool though.
Yeah. All right, man. I want to jump to the next time capsule. This is still, to date, one of my favorite ones. It's one that I think about quite often, and just listening back to it creeps me out. So, listener, get ready, enjoy. One afternoon in May of 1973, a young girl and her friend decided to go explore a local golf course in their small town called Sandown, which was located just off the southeastern coast of the Isle of Wight. As they laughed and played, and no doubt enjoyed the weather that day, they both began to hear a weird wailing noise in the distance. A noise they would later describe as being somewhat like an ambulance siren. Deciding to move closer to the sound to find out what it was, or at least where it was coming from, they followed it across the golf links and through a hedge leading to a swampy meadow adjacent to a little used local airport, the Sandown Airport. The noise stopped. As they began to cross a wooden footbridge over a small, narrow brook, a blue-gloved hand appeared from underneath the bridge, and a strange figure emerged. The figure fumbled with a book in its hands and then dropped it into the water, and then, almost in a panic, splashed around to retrieve it. The two children then watched the figure enter a metallic hut, similar to those used on building sites, except that it had no windows. It moved along with a strange, almost artificial hopping motion with its knees raised high. The children, thinking nothing of it really, began to wander off and were about 50 yards away when the figure reappeared carrying a black knobbed microphone with a white, flexible cord attached. The wailing noise immediately returned. This time being so loud that the young boy was scared and began to run away. The noise stopped, and the figure spoke into the microphone.
"Hello? Are you still there?"
he asked. And although pretty far off from the children, they could hear his voice as clearly as though he were right next to them. And in response to what they considered to be a friendly tone, they walked closer so that they could speak to the oddly attired person or creature. He was nearly 7 feet tall and had no neck, and his head appeared to be wedged straight onto his shoulders. He wore a yellow, pointed hat, which interlocked with the red collar of a green tunic. A round black knob was affixed to the top of his hat, and wooden antennae were attached to either side. The face had triangular markings for eyes, a brown square of a nose, and motionless yellow lips. Other round markings were on his paper-white cheeks, and a fringe of red hair fell onto his forehead. Wooden slats protruded from his sleeves and from below his white trousers. His first communication was in writing. He wrote in a notebook, and in large handwriting, he wrote, "Hello, I am All Colors Sam." The young boy was pretty hesitant, but Faye read each word as it was pointed to.
"I am All Colors Sam."
This was necessary as the words were not laid out in a conventional sequence. The children ventured closer and discovered that the creature could talk without the aid of the microphone, though his lips did not move and speech was unclear, rather like that of a person who does not open his mouth properly. He asked the children about themselves, so they ventured to ask questions too. They asked about his clothes, which were all ripped and shredded.
"Why are your clothes so torn?"
Then he told them he only had this one pair, so he could only wear these. Because of his strange white features, they asked,
"Are you really a man?"
"No."
They also asked,
"Well then, are you a ghost?"
in which he answered vaguely,
"Well, not really, but I am in an odd sort of way."
"Well, what exactly are you then?"
they continued, but only obtained the answer,
"You know."
with no further explanation. He said that there were others like him, But he also confided that he was frightened of people and scared that they might hurt him. Apparently, if attacked, he would not fight back. At his invitation, the children crawled through a flap in his hut, which contained 2 levels. The lower level had plenty of headroom and was wallpapered in blue-green and covered with pattern of dials. It also had an electric heater and simple wooden furniture. He told the children that he fed upon berries which he collected in the late afternoon.
This is what I eat. They are safe.
He didn't say where, but did indicate that he had a camp on the mainland he could go to. He also said that the water from the river could be drunk once he had cleaned it. Once inside the hut, he removed his hat to reveal round, white ears and sparse brown hair. Before eating a berry, he performed an odd conjuring trick.
Here, let me show you.
He placed the berry in his ear, thrust his head forward, and caused the berry to disappear and reappear at one of his eyes. Repeating the process, the berry traveled to his mouth. The children talked to the strange being for a half hour or slightly more. And then, after saying their goodbyes, the children rushed across the golf course to tell the first man they could find that they had just seen what they thought was a ghost.
Believe me, you've just seen a ghost.
Who was this creature, this Sam? Perhaps an alien from another planet. Or a creature from another dimension. Was he a ghost? Or was he a man playing an elaborate prank on 2 youngsters dressed as a strange robotic clown? Or was he just the creation of a young girl's overactive imagination? And since that day in 1973, there have been no more reports of any sightings of Sam the Sandown ghost clown. Perhaps one day you'll be walking along and you'll hear,
Hello? Are you still there?
Man, I still absolutely love that time capsule. I know that we said it on the episode, and I think we've even said it multiple times since, but this is such an amazing, and just the visuals of the story are just so wild that, like, neither of us had ever heard of it. And again, like, I kind of am in deep on all this stuff. And so this is one of those high strangeness stories where, I mean, it has all the components to make it
just like super fun and entertaining, and
but also
and just nuts.
How is it not more widely known? Because it is so kind of nuts and colorful and visual, but God, it's just incredible.
Yeah, man. And again, going like as far as sound design goes, man, this one, I mean this. I wish I could find a picture of the amount of tracks, and this one has, I think, the time capsule to date even that took me the longest in terms of sound design, because like I wanted it to. It took me a long time to get, like, I wanted Sam's voice to be, weird, but not scary.
Right.
And, because listening back to the story, it's like the children weren't scared of him. I wanted it to sound like, one of the descriptors was like, it sounded as if like someone was talking and their mouth like couldn't close, right? So he has that open mouth thing. I wanted it to be robotic and somewhat alien and like, but deep and like, so that was fun because like all of the different things that I would do to affect my voice would kind of change the performance a little bit. And so once I found the sound that I wanted, I kind of had to like go back and like sort of quote unquote like re-perform those lines and stuff. But still, man, the one that still blows my mind, and in fact, like so many of our friends and listeners like messaged us after we released this episode initially, and they were like, dude, who was the little girl that you guys got to say those things? And I was like, that was me. And if you're listening to my voice right now, it's kind of hard to imagine that I could make my voice sound like that.
Yeah.
I mean, now I don't want to pat myself on the back too much here, but like the British accent, the fact,
Very
all that
good.
stuff, man, and like listening back to it, it even amazes me. I'm like, my gosh, that sounds just like a little like British girl.
Yeah.
It's amazing, man. And it was so much fun to do, like all the texture sounds and stuff, like when they talk about him like going across the bridge or the way that he walked. That was a fun one to create, that sound and kind of, if you're using headphones, you can hear him doing that weird high step from like one ear all the way around to the other ear. And it was just, man, so much fun. So much fun to do that.
Yeah, that was an episode where as soon as you sent it back for me to like start mixing and working on that, it was like, okay, Woody's like, it's bump. We're up to another level now. We've leveled up. It's an amazing episode. The story's just cool, but like, the sound design on that one is it still stands up as one of the best.
And one of the things that came out right after we did that episode, well, I guess like several episodes later, we were reminded of, and go back and listen to this episode if you get a chance, but the Night of the Harlequin, and the possibility that Sam, the Sandown Ghost Clown, perhaps is kind of like one of those like Harlequin elemental sort of beings. And then also maybe, is he a time traveler? Is he like a John Teeter situation? Was that John? I mean, man, this happened in like the 70s.
Yeah.
John Teeter came back for, maybe he I don't know, man. It starts to just kind of make me a little dizzy because it's like, it's just amazing, man. I mean, we kind of touched on it too, like the experiences her dad had. Like in prior years where there was like this giant craft in the ocean that he like saw, coming up out of the water, and then just like it was in the water and then it just like disappears underwater and stuff.
Well, and before that, there was a thing where like basically these sort of like balls of light were following him in his car.
Oh yeah.
And I think this does add credibility to the story. Is like all these accounts that the dad had, he never told anybody this stuff. Even it was new to the daughter when he finally kind of broke and started talking about it. So that's really cool. And I think it does kind of tie in with that sort of generational thing where whatever these things are, whether they're aliens or interdimensional or elementals or ghosts or whatever, there is an element of this sort of family sort of bond or connection. Yeah, where, if this thing's going to follow the dad, then more than likely it's going to follow the daughter and just continue, which is pretty scary, actually. Yeah, speaking of the sound design, there's another podcast that we really like called The Belief Hole. Great podcast. 3 brothers do the show, and they actually, this was much later after we had done Sam the Sandown Clown. They had done this episode, and they were kind of covering this book called Disembodied Voices by Tim Marcinko. It's spelled Marczeenko. And this book is, neither of us have read it. I'm probably going to order it here soon, but the whole book is kind of about that, the concept of, he kind of has this phrase, I think, throughout the book called the lure, the trap, and the lost. So it's like this sort of siren song or this thing that's like trying to lure people in. I mean, you think of, with the Harlequin, it would just show up in this kid's room, Dan Mitchell's room. It would say it was the tooth fairy and try to like play with him. With Sam, it stuck this 3-fingered glove out from under this bridge and was like shaking it around to like lure the kids down. And I mean, obviously nothing, well, we don't know, but we think nothing really happened from what we're told in the story. He didn't do anything that was sort of maleficent or bad or anything to the kids, but it's this, they kind of talk about how all these things tie in with and they talk about this sort of phenomenon being called the Leshy or the Neshi or the Nishi, and it links back and ties all the way back to like the god Pan and all this stuff. And then it further goes into like the missing 411 and all that kind of stuff. But like the thing that blew my mind when I heard this particular episode, and we'll put it in the show notes, their episode, it's a great episode, but they're talking about how these, the Nishi or whatever, these things that were trying to like lure people off into the distance. I mean, kind of like, you even think of like the Will of the Wisps. They were supposedly they would lure, these little balls of light would, lure travelers off the trail, and then they would just disappear. And so they really break down really well the idea of like, okay, what would these things be doing now? How would these things translate into the modern age? And so the writer of the book, the Tim Marcinko guy, he had one of the things that caused him to write the book was he had an event when he was a kid, and he kept hearing these beeps in the forest, and
like almost like calling to him from the forest.
Yeah, almost like your curiosity would be like, oh, what's that? Where's that coming from? And then he would go out, and then he said that later in life, kind of the same thing, and he would hear like there was one sort of encounter with this thing where he would hear like it sounded like just a recorded message that was in the woods, and it kept repeating the same thing, and it was in the voice of like his girlfriend, who clearly wasn't out in the woods in the middle of the night. And it's this idea that like, these beeps and this sort of digital sort of aspect of it. I think Timothy Renner over on the Strange Familiars podcast, I think he's had an encounter like that where you would hear these like beeps, and is that what it would look like in 2021? Is instead of being like a little light that we would follow off the trail, or instead of being whatever.
It does seem, dude, that's interesting that you say it like that, because like it does seem like it is intelligent enough to know, like, for example, when you said light falling in the woods, it makes me think of like the Will of the Wisps or something.
Right.
And it's like you go back to like 1600s,
Oh,
a
yeah.
little light, flickering in the woods would be like not alarming, but it would be interesting enough for somebody to go investigate.
Right.
You put like some kind of like mechanical sound and whatever in the 1600s, they're going to run like hell.
Yeah, it'd be terrifying.
But
yeah.
like nowadays, it's kind of like, so in other words, like those things kind of evolve almost like intelligently to know like, oh, this is just enough to where it won't be a terrifying thing for like a kid or whatever.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
man.
it's
Didn't he say too in that podcast it was like one of the recorded voice, like it sounded like his dad was calling him?
Yeah, that was another one. He was like playing basketball as the sun was going down.
Yeah, that's it.
And he kept hearing his dad would say, "Son, come help me." And he was like in the woods, and then it would like repeat itself, but it was basically like the same recording.
It's Terminator 2, bro.
It's Skynet.
Remember that part when he's like, John Connor's on the phone, he's talking to his like step parents, and the dog's barking in the background. He's like, he like covers the phone, and he like, looks at the Terminator, he's like,
The dog's really barking. Honey, are you okay? I'm right here. I'm fine.
Are you sure? Are you sure you're all right?
What's the dog's name?
Max. Hey, Janelle. What's wrong with Wolfie? I can hear him barking. Is he okay?
Wolfie's fine, honey. Wolfie's just fine. What are you?
Your foster parents are dead.
But yeah, that the reason I bring that episode up is it kind of like I came to this realization listening that kind of blew me away, and again, this could have no relation at all, but thinking of this sort of digital evolution of whatever this thing is, the Nishi, the Leshy, the whatever is this luring thing. My situation when I had the missing time when I worked in the operating room of a hospital, and I never thought about. I mean, we did Sam the Sandown Clown, we did the Night of the Harlequin episode, and like I never put two and two together. But when I was listening to this podcast, like when I'm in the operating room and we're about to move a patient, and so like you have the top doctors some of the highest doctors in the nation, were like beside me, the nurses. I mean, it's like a real serious situation. And all I remember was my radio made like a beep and then went, and then what I remember, again, maybe it's like a screen memory or something, but what I remember was moving and turnover in some other room. And that was the last thing I remember. But then, when I talked to my buddy Ernie, who was the other ORA or assistant that was helping me move the patient from the bed to the table, he said, what he saw is I just kind of like set down the thing that I had set down the sheet and the little roller thing that were in my hands. Mm-hmm. I just set it back down, and then I just kind of looked at the door and just walked straight to the door out. And so it's like, was that part of this thing? That digital sound, whatever just kind of maybe like mesmerized me or hypnotized me, like whatever that was that tied into this? I mean, it's crazy.
Dude, have I ever told you about the drum beats that we hear, like, that we've heard since we moved into this house for like years and years?
No.
Oh my gosh, dude. No joke. The first couple years we lived in this house, we thought someone like across the kind of like
valley.
I guess it's like a creek and valley in my backyard that leads to the lake or whatever. We thought maybe it's just like a high school kid like practicing for drumline.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, we thought, well, maybe we can hear the drumline practicing from the high school football field,
mm-hmm.
which is kind of a stretch.
Yeah, that's
because it's like
pretty
2.5 miles away, 3 miles. But still, maybe. And then we've been here long enough to where that kid would have graduated by now. And it's generally around, and it's like at weird times. Sometimes it's like in the afternoon. Sometimes it's like at 10 in the morning on a weekday, and you hear this like, doom, 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 doom. I mean, it's like Jumanji, man. I'm not joking.
Whoa.
But like far in the distance. And so we thought, are we hearing like ancient Native American drums? Mm-hmm. Is it someone that's just like messing around? The only thing now, our newest theory, is that it is some sort of like drum beat over at the Olympic rowing venue that's used to pace the rowers. That's the only thing we can think about.
Surely. I mean, is that even a thing, though?
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah.
They'll have somebody playing drums.
Well, I don't know if they have somebody playing drums, but they have like on the loudspeaker. To be honest with you, I don't know. So anyway, I mean, all this stuff, dude, is so crazy. And it does, like, I feel like we never have enough time really to like go even in more depth. Right, but I think it was a good like idea for us to kind of revisit these. And frankly, like we're so proud of them. Mm-hmm. And every time I work on these time capsules, for example, it's like, I can't wait until everybody hears them just because they're so fun to make. And well, I mean, frankly, I just put so much time into it, but there's just so many connections. Like, I don't know. It's just mind blowing. Like, I feel like, is Sam the sent down ghost clown, like a Pan figure? Is mm-hmm. he a time traveler? Is he like, what if it's just like somebody that accidentally got into a time machine and is just like, huh? Yeah. Or like maybe it's an intelligent robot, but that Skynet sent back, and that's the first Terminator version.
Yeah, with wooden antennas.
Yeah, with wooden antenna. But yeah, I mean, we also have like a ton more that I can't wait to kind of dive into. Like,
and there's many more to come and to be made.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully, mm-hmm. like we said, we know you've more than likely heard these. If this is your first time listening to the show, then you got kind of a bonus treat. You got 2 back-to-back time capsules, 2 really fascinating stories, a little bit of behind the scenes on making them, and our kind of renewed interest in those topics and how they relate to the episodes that we've done recently. Mm-hmm. But I do encourage you to kind of go back and listen to all of our episodes, because we do we do have several just very interesting tales that we know you'll love.
Oh yeah.
So like we say week after week, thank you guys so much for coming out. Thank you guys so much for listening, and mostly too like interacting with us outside of the the times that you're listening to the show, or even sometimes while you're listening to it. It's just awesome to get like messages from listeners, even just like kind words about how you enjoyed the episode every single week. It just means so much to us, and we love it.
Yeah.
So definitely don't stop doing that. Be sure to check out our merchandise at our merch shop. You can go there very easily by just clicking the link in our bio on Instagram, or you can just go to shop.spreadshirt.com/thatwouldberad.
Yeah,
and Tyler, where can people interact with us the most?
Well, the bulk of our social media presence is at Instagram. That would be rad. If you have anything to, any messages, feel free to DM us. If it's more long form, feel free to shoot it to thatwouldberadpod@gmail.com. Not to derail the closing here, but what you said, Woody, with sometimes like we can tell that our listeners are listening like as the podcast comes out, or the day they're released.
Yeah.
Our buddy Clay, it's awesome. You can tell like he'll like comment something and then he'll do like another comment. So it's almost like
you can tell like where he is in the
episode.
Yeah.
I love
awesome.
that. But yeah, like what he said, week after week, we appreciate you guys coming back. We couldn't do it without you. So we appreciate you. We thank you for everything. We love you. And as always,
be rad.
That's the way it goes.
Clouds in a time where I just needed some sunshine. You were already dead before you became a ghost. You always